The nays are 50. Under the previous order requiring 60 votes for the adoption of this amendment, the amendment is not agreed to.
Madam President.
The senator from Tennessee. May we have order in the chambers, please?
Madam President, I understand I have 3 or 4 minutes to speak about the GAIN Act.
On whose time does the senator wish to speak?
How much time? About 4 minutes.
On an amendment or on a bill?
On the bill. Okay.
The senator is recognized.
Thank you for your courtesy. Madam President, I rise to...
Madam Parliamentary inquiry, if the senator would just yield for a second.
The senator from Iowa.
I just want to ask where there's a lot of commotion going on here.
The senator from Iowa.
I just wanted to know where the time is coming from for the senator from Tennessee.
The senator said that he was speaking on the bill.
Madam President, how much time is left on the bill?
The senator from Iowa controls 15 minutes, and the senator from Wyoming controls 22 minutes.
How much time did the senator from Tennessee seek?
3 minutes.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know how long you wanted to talk.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Whatever, that's fine.
Yeah, I know.
Madam President.
The senator from Wyoming.
I'll yield 3 minutes to the senator from...
And I'll yield him 3 minutes, too, if he needs it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both.
Senator from Tennessee.
I'm really rising to thank both the majority and minority leader of this bill for their great efforts, and I'm pleased to speak today about a provision in this FDA Safety and Innovation Act that addresses a growing public threat in Tennessee, Connecticut, and across the nation. Several months ago, Senator Blumenthal and I introduced a bill called the GAIN Act. This bipartisan provision provides meaningful market incentives and reduces regulatory burdens to encourage the development of new antibiotics that will help save lives and reduce health care costs. Drug-resistant bacteria, or superbugs as we commonly call them, are becoming harder and harder to treat because we lack new antibiotics capable of combating these infections. Not only do these infections take a toll on patients and their families, but they also run up health care spending to the tune of $35 to $45 billion annually. It's crucial that these new antibiotics are discovered in order to stay ahead of this growing trend of drug resistance. Drug discoveries do not happen overnight, as we all know, so we must act now to ensure that we have life-saving medications when we really need them. The GAIN Act is a straightforward, common-sense bill that provides market incentives to encourage innovation without putting federal dollars at stake, and it's included in this FDA reauthorization. Antibiotic resistance is a growing issue that we must address now to properly prepare for the future. Dr. William Evans, Director and CEO of St. Jude's Hospital in Tennessee, recently wrote a letter supporting this bill, and this is his quote: "We don't want to find ourselves in a situation in which we've been able to save a child's life after cancer diagnosis only to lose them to an untreatable multi-drug resistant infection." I'd like to thank my colleague Senator Blumenthal from Connecticut for his leadership on this bill, and I especially want to thank Senators Harkin and Enzi for working with us the way they have to include this provision in the FDA Safety and Innovation Act. Madam President, I think I stayed within my limit. I yield the floor and thank you for the time.
Who yields time? The senator from Wyoming.
I'd yield 5 minutes from my time on the bill to the senator from Ohio.
Ranking member and I congratulate him on his
success. The senator from Ohio.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I want to congratulate the ranking member and chair for their good work today on this legislation. There are a couple of amendments that are part of the underlying bill that I'd like to speak briefly about. The first has to do with prescription drug abuse, a problem we all face as representatives of our states, and I want to particularly thank Senator Whitehouse for his partnership on this important bill. In the past decade, unfortunately, prescription drug abuse has reached epidemic proportions in states like Ohio and in so many other states around the country. In doing so, it's devastated the lives of so many individuals, but also the well-being of our communities and, of course, affected their families, affected our economy. It's caused a big spike in crimes, including theft, as addicts have looked for ways to support their addictions. And the crime, of course, has doubly strained law enforcement, which has already had to contend with this increase in drug trafficking with constrained budgets. It's also served, unfortunately, as a gateway to other drug use, including heroin use, which tends to be less expensive and has caused additional public health challenges. Amazingly, since 2007, drug overdoses have now moved ahead of car accidents as the leading cause of accidental death in my home state of Ohio. And again, we've seen this, unfortunately, too often around the country. We've had record levels of hepatitis C infection from needle sharing. In one county along the Ohio River in southern Ohio, 10% of the babies born in 2010 had drugs in their system. The good news is progress is being made in places like Sauter County and around the country thanks to the hard work of law enforcement, local, state, and federal officials, community groups, family schools, churches, and others. But they need some help. More work needs to be done. And one tool they're looking for in the fight against prescription drug abuse is a better way to monitor prescription drug use. There are databases around the country called prescription drug monitoring programs. They allow states to monitor and track the dispensing of prescription drug medications by health care providers to be able to identify abuse and stop abuse of people getting prescriptions for these drugs in various different doctors' offices and what have been called pill mills. Preliminary research has shown that monitoring programs are highly effective in stemming the tide of abuse. That's why 41 states and one territory now have them. There's a problem, however. Different states' monitoring programs can't communicate with one another. So one state doesn't know what the other state is doing. And drug trafficking is an interstate problem. This is especially true in places like Sauter County in southern Ohio, right across the river from Kentucky and very close to West Virginia. So we want these states to be able to work together. That's why Senator Whitehouse and I have offered this Amendment 2145. It's a federal solution providing a framework for monitoring programs to participate in data sharing across state lines. The amendment also supports collaboration between the Department of Health and Human Services and the Bureau of Justice Assistance in order to further their research to assess challenges that have an impact on state interoperability. Some have called for a national monitoring program, one federal program. I don't think that's necessary. I don't think it'll work as well. A lot of states have programs that are working extremely well. They've put a lot of money into it, and it's based on differing protected health information standards state by state. So rather than trying to federalize it, our amendment gets these disparate programs to work together securely, reliably, and efficiently without undermining or jeopardizing the state autonomy in this area. States should remain free to establish laws that determine user eligibility and reporting requirements, for instance. So this legislation is smart legislation to help, again, give these communities the tools they need to fight this prescription drug abuse. Finally, I would say our amendment has no effect on direct spending or revenues over the 10-year period. The other amendment I want to mention also has to do with substance abuse. It's about the dangers of what we've, unfortunately, all here in this chamber heard about, which is synthetic drug abuse, including K2 spice, bath salts, herbal incense. Today we have the opportunity to do something about this problem. Let's prohibit these drugs from getting in the hands of our children, our servicemen and women, and others. This amendment addresses the growing use and misuse of synthetic drugs by placing 15 synthetic drugs, 2 stimulants, 9 hallucinogens in Schedule 1 to expose those who manufacture, distribute, possess, import, and export synthetic drugs without proper authority to the full spectrum of criminal, civil, and administrative penalties, sanctions, and regulatory controls. I'd like to give special thanks today to the people who've really led this effort here over the years in this chamber, Senator Grassley, Senator Schumer, Senator Klobuchar. They've worked hard on this issue, and we're all pleased that this is part of the underlying legislation. Senator Grassley, as well as folks from the Community Anti-Drug Coalition, originally introduced me to this rising prevalence of designer drugs. I was told about the story of David Michelle Rosga and others who have suffered some of the deaths that have occurred around the country. The amendment, again, would have no significant effects on direct spending or revenues over the 10-year period, and again is a good common sense approach to trying to get our hands around this issue, help the constituents we represent, help our communities to fight to stem this substance abuse that's affecting us all. Madam Chair, thank you, and I yield the floor. Madam President, I yield back the remainder of my time, yield the floor, and note the absence of a quorum.
Would the senator withhold his request? Senator from North Carolina.
Madam President, I rise today to speak in support of the Food and Drug Administration Safety and Innovation Act.
Excuse me, can I inquire of the senator how much time the senator would like?
I would request 6 minutes.
We yield 6 minutes off the bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator is recognized.
Thank you. First, I do want to applaud the hard work of the Senate Help Committee Chairman, Senator Tom Harkin, and the Ranking Member, Senator Mike Enzi. This bill is truly one of the most bipartisan efforts I have had the opportunity to be a part of in the 3 years I have served in the U.S. Senate. It ought to be a reminder that, yes, when we work together across the aisle, the Senate can get things done. I'm particularly proud to support this bill because of what it will mean for patients who are suffering with diseases, who do not have access to adequate treatments, or who do not have access to any treatment at all. This bill we are voting on includes key provisions of the TREAT Act. And the TREAT Act is the Transforming the Regulatory Environment to Accelerate Access to Treatments Act, which I introduced in February. These important provisions will expedite the review of treatments for serious or life-threatening diseases without compromising the FDA's already high standards for safety and effectiveness. I introduced the TREAT Act after meeting with a family whose child suffered from spinal muscular atrophy, or SMA. SMA is an incurable neuromuscular disease and is the leading genetic cause of infant deaths. Of course, this family was not alone. There are 30 million Americans suffering from rare diseases, and I've had the honor to meet a number of them. Their stories are both heartbreaking and inspiring. When I visited the North Carolina Children's Hospital last month, I met with Megan and Jared Hendren from Lumberton, North Carolina, whose 13-month-old twins, Logan and Lucas, suffer from Gaucher's disease. This disease is a painful and potentially debilitating metabolic disorder for which currently there is no cure. I also met with a 8-year-old Ashley Burnett from Raleigh, who is resilient and wise beyond her years and is suffering from neuroblastoma. For patients like these suffering from these rare diseases from which there are no approved medications, medical advances for these patients and their families cannot come fast enough. There are so many rare diseases, but fewer than 250 have FDA-approved therapies. The provisions of the TREAT Act that have been included in this bill take great steps toward resolving the problem. There is currently a pathway at the FDA to expedite the review of drugs for illnesses that are serious or life-threatening and for which there is no adequate treatment. This is called the Accelerated Approval Pathway. Since the early 1990s, it has been successfully used to advance treatments for patients with HIV and cancer by leaps and bounds. However, it has not been applied regularly or consistently to the review of drugs to treat other diseases. And this is inconsistent, and this inconsistency is why I introduced the TREAT Act. My bill will broaden the application of the accelerated approval pathway beyond HIV, AIDS, and cancer to a wider range of diseases, with a particular focus on rare diseases. That's why my proposal enjoys broad support from patient advocates, including the National Organization of Rare Diseases, Us Against Alzheimer's, Parkinson's Action Network, the Huntington's Disease Society of America, and many more. By providing for consistent application, we will help the FDA implement these provisions, assist drug sponsors navigate the approval process, and hopefully bring safe and effective treatments more rapidly to the patients that need them. I'm also proud to have played a critical role in the legislation that led to the negotiations of the first biosimilars user fee agreement, which is also included in the bill before us. Last Congress, we passed the Biologics Price Competition and Innovation Act to facilitate the introduction of lower-cost alternatives to biologic drugs while ensuring continued research and development into innovative biologics which could save or improve the lives of millions of Americans. The user fees negotiated by the industry and the FDA will provide the necessary funding for the review of these critical therapies. The biosimilars industry is in the earliest stages of development, and the biosimilars user fee agreement will help facilitate this industry's growth. In addition, the FDA Safety and Innovation Act provides the necessary regulatory updates to keep pace with the rapid innovations of the biopharmaceutical industry. This is imperative for creating jobs in states like mine in North Carolina and maintaining America's competitive edge in the global economy. Companies with footprints in North Carolina are partnering with our world-class universities to improve the health of people all across the globe every day by researching, discovering, and developing life-saving treatments for those suffering from these devastating diseases. The passage of the FDA Safety and Innovation Act for states like North Carolina and for our nation to remain global leaders is important, and especially to help attract the jobs of the future. The American public also expects the FDA to be the world's gold standard when it comes to ensuring the supply, the safety, and the integrity of our drug supply. By sending the FDA Safety and Innovation Act to the President's desk, we will establish a clear and effective pathway for turning ideas into cures and cures into treatments, and will have shown the foresight and flexibility required to maintain our country's position at the top of the medical treatment and device industries. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Madam President, I urge my colleagues to join in supporting the FDA Safety Innovation Act. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Iowa?
I ask that further proceedings in the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Madam President, I ask that I suggest the absence of a quorum, and I ask that the time be taken off of the Burr amendment.
Equally.
On both sides, equally on both sides off the Burr amendment.
Without objection, so ordered. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka. I ask unanimous consent to be recognized for 10 minutes and the time be equally taken from the Burr Amendment, equally divided from both sides.
Without objection.
Thanks, Madam Chair. We have 3 counties in Delaware. The southernmost county is called Sussex County. And several years ago, I was privileged to visit a Methodist church there and speak as a lay speaker and try to encourage people to become mentors. And the minister that day is a fellow named Reynolds, Reverend Reynolds. Great old guy, now deceased. But he said to me that day these words, and I've never forgotten them. He said, "The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing." That's what he said. The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And at first I wasn't sure what he was talking about, but the more I thought about it, I said, boy, this guy's smart. And if I'm smart, I will keep the main thing the main thing. And I think for us here in the Senate and in Congress, one of the things the main thing for the voters of this country is they want us to work together. Well, maybe there are 2 main things. They want us to work together. They want Democrats and Republicans to work together. They want us to get things done. And one of the things that they want us to get done is to create what I call a nurturing environment for job creation, job preservation. They want us to do things that are going to help encourage the creation of jobs and the preservation of jobs. Little known to a lot of folks across the country, we've actually been doing some of that in the Senate for much of this year. And we've worked productively across party lines to pass a series of bills that I think do help create a more nurturing environment for job preservation, job creation. And just a couple examples, if I could, Madam President. One, the reauthorization of the Federal Aviation Administration to establish a new source of revenues, additional revenues, to modernize and update airports from across the country, to bring the air traffic control system of our country into the 21st century, really kind of an analog system, and bring it into the digital age. Patent reform is another significant step forward earlier this year, where we say enough there's patent trolls, people who come in after someone else's file for a patent and say, oh no, that was my idea, and just botch things up and drag things out in the courts. No, under our patent reform legislation, you're first to file. You're first to file. That's your patent. And to provide in the same legislation the resources needed in the Patent Office to more expeditiously patent process applicants. Free trade agreements. One of our roles as a government here is to try to make sure that we have access to foreign markets. And if our goods and services are being closed out in those foreign markets, then to open them up. And we agreed to a broad bipartisan proposal here this year for 3 of them, actually, 3 free trade agreements, 1 with South Korea, 1 with Colombia, 1 with Panama, negotiated originally by the George W. Bush administration, embraced by the Obama administration. That is now the law of the land, if you will. And to make sure when businesses have the opportunity to export, and the barriers that have maybe kept them out in the past are knocked down or eliminated, to make sure that if they need financing, those American businesses need financing and help to finance their exports, that they have that kind of help through the Export-Import Bank, which we've reauthorized and extended into the future. Another one that we've worked on this year together, bipartisan bill supported by the President, was something called the Jobs Act. And what it really is all about is trying to make sure that companies have better access to capital when they happen to be like a small, maybe privately held company that wants to go public, to make sure that they can do it through something called an IPO on-ramp, as opposed to just trying to jump into it and get it done all at once, or for companies that want to stay privately held and for them to be capped at what it was in a 1964 level, 500 shareholders, to say, no, you can go up to 1,000 or 2,000 shareholders, and to enable them to have that access to capital and to continue to grow and to create jobs. Other examples of bipartisan legislation which we've worked on, in one case, transportation bill, land transportation, roads, highways, bridges, and transit. We passed a good bill here in the Senate, paid for, to help, at least for the next couple of years, meet our transportation needs and make sure that the 3 million people that are working on transportation and transit projects across the country don't basically get laid off in a month or 2. We passed a good bill. I give a lot of credit to Senators Boxer and Inhofe for helping to lead the bipartisan approach. And also, 7 or 8 million jobs depend on the Postal Service. And the Postal Service is in tough straits and running out of money and losing $25 million a day. We're hoping that the House of Representatives will pass a bill. They need to, so that we can go to conference and help fix that problem. But good bipartisan legislation here to affect positively 7 or 8 million jobs that depend on the Postal Service. All that stuff, you know, in terms of the American people wanting us to work together, we have been. Those are just a couple of examples. In terms of actually doing things that help create jobs and preserve jobs, every one of the items I just mentioned does create a more nurturing environment for job creation and job preservation. In the coming weeks, we also want to work on agricultural legislation, bipartisan bill again out of the Ag Committee. It'll save billions of dollars deficit on a deficit side. It'll also help to strengthen our agricultural economy. We need to get to work on a national flood insurance update, and that legislation helps to bolster the home building industry in this country, which is struggling, as we know. And we have the opportunity for those things that are honored to do this, to get them done. But today, the Senate's considering another important bipartisan piece of legislation. As we know, the Food and Drug Administration's Safety and Innovation Act, affectionately known by its acronym. I don't like acronyms, but I love this one. This one's called PDUFA. And it's really the FDA, and how do we make sure the FDA has the resources that they need to do their jobs. And like the other bills passed by the Senate that I just talked about, this bill helps to create a more nurturing environment for businesses to thrive. And those businesses include pharmaceutical business. It includes businesses that make and sell medical devices. But just as important, this bill helps ensure that Americans get access to life-saving medications and medical devices that are developed in this country as soon and as safely as possible. This bill reflects a strong bipartisan bicameral effort for which Chairman Harkin and Ranking Member Mike Enzi deserve enormous praise, and I praise them. Even though they're not in the chamber right now, I've talked to both of them already. They've done great work, and I thank them and their staffs for bringing us to this point today. But the legislation builds upon the successful current user fee programs that for a number of years that companies have paid a user fee if they want the FDA to approve a drug or medical device. And we're making progress to actually have more of the resources at the FDA to do this than they used to. But they need some additional help, and this legislation would do that, paid for by the industries that are seeking the consideration of their new pharmaceuticals and their new medical devices. The legislation also adds important new user fees for generic and biological drugs. Those user fees are paid, again, by the prescription drug and medical device industries to help cover the FDA's cost for reviewing new drugs and medical devices. What this means is it means safer drugs and a speedier process to bring new and less expensive drugs and medical devices to markets for consumers, and I think it's a win-win for just about everybody. As a result of this legislation, the FDA legislation, affectionately known as PDUFA, the FDA's drug review times have already been cut in half. That's good. If these user fees, these user programs are not reauthorized, though, the FDA would have to lay off, I'm told, about 2,000 employees, which would put them back in the soup, back in the ditch, if you will, and begin delaying again the review and approval of new drugs. We don't want to see that happen. And that would threaten patient access to new therapies, as well as pharmaceutical and medical devices for industry, for jobs, and America's global leadership in biomedical innovation. This bill also makes medicines safer for millions of children, improves the FDA's tools to police the global drug supply chain, and reduces the risk of drug shortages. Now, there are a number of amendments that are being offered to the bill. We voted on a couple of those. And one of the amendments that we'll be voting on, I believe, a little bit later this afternoon is legislation that would, in my view, weaken or contaminate our country's supply of prescription drugs, put our patients and our health care system at risk. Some of my colleagues have proposed to include a measure in this bill that ostensibly would lower prescription drug prices. This amendment, in my view, however, is not without unintended consequences, and we always have to be careful of those. Unfortunately,
Senator's time has expired.
Could I ask unanimous consent for 3 more minutes, Madam President?
Without objection.
Equally divided. Unfortunately, it would open our borders to increased numbers of contaminated and adulterated drugs. The proposal to import drugs from Canada would allow drugs to be imported wholesale, often from illegal internet pharmacies with no protection against abuse or contamination. And also, through those measures supposed to be about importing drugs from Canada, in truth, it would allow drugs to come from countries that don't have the kinds of strong inspection and policing of prescription drugs that we have here in the United States. Instead of going down that road, we should work to increase the FDA's ability to protect and regulate our drug supply. And while doing so, we should reject any proposal to import drugs, I think, from Canada that undermine our ability to ensure that prescription drugs are safe and effective. One last thing I want to mention, there's an amendment that is going to be offered today, maybe already has been, but I'm going to mention this anyway. It deals with generic drugs and concern about the ability for larger pharmaceutical companies to work with and really buy out the generic drug companies so that they don't object to the end of so the generic drug company doesn't bring their drugs, the generic version of a name brand drug to market. I just want to say we need to be careful what we're doing here. I came out of the Navy, came to this Congress in 1983, freshman congressman, and in 1982, 20% of the prescriptions being filled in this country were generic drugs, 20%. This year, 80% of the medicines that are being, prescriptions that are being filled, 80% are generic. And one of the well-intentioned amendments that to have been offered today is one that says, well, we're not making enough progress toward allowing the generics to grow. Say that again. We've gone from 20% generic penetration in 1982 to today, 80%. And I would just suggest that we should declare victory. And as time goes by, even that 80% will become 85% or 90%. But we've gone a long ways. And as a result of that, people who need to buy medicines, they can find a generic version of almost any medicine that's being sold in this country. And I think the system's working just fine, and we ought to allow it to continue to work. In closing, Madam President, the main thing is the main thing. The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. That's what I start off by saying. And for us, the main thing is to work together. We are, on a whole host of ways, including with the great leadership of Senator Harkin and Senator Enzi, working here to make sure that our pharmaceutical industry is vibrant and strong, medical device industry vital and strong, but also that patients are not disadvantaged, they're actually advantaged by all of that. So we responding to folks in Delaware and Iowa and across the country, Missouri, we're working together on and we're not just working together on a couple of things, a whole host of things, a whole litany of provisions, and laws and proposals that do what? Help us to create a more nurturing environment for job creation and job preservation. That's a good thing. That's a very good thing. With that having been said, I want to thank Mr. Senator Harkin for giving me a chance to say a few words today, again, for the great work that you and Senator Enzi have done, and happy to follow your leadership here again today. Thank you.
Madam President.
Senator from Iowa.
I appreciate the remarks made by my good friend from Delaware, and I thank him and his staff also for their inputs on this bill. And again, this bill is the work of a lot of different people, and I want to thank the senator from Delaware for helping us get to the point where we have a good consensus bill. Thank him very much for his input on it.
Mr. President.
Does the senator from New Jersey? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know who was here first, but Senator from West Virginia, seek time.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
How much time would the senator like?
7. 5, 7.
7 minutes?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I think the senator from New Jersey was here
okay.
first. I think seeking recognition. How much time does the senator?
Thank you. Just about
5 minutes.
About 6, 7 minutes the most.
Is there any time remaining on the Burr Amendment?
No, there's no time remaining on the Burr Amendment.
Okay. I would yield 6 minutes off the bill to the senator from New Jersey. Pardon? Oh, I'm sorry. Madam President, let me revise that. I'd take 6 minutes off of the McCain Amendment on our side for the senator from New Jersey.
Without objection.
I thank the senator from Iowa. Madam President, I rise to speak against the amendment 2107, the one that talks about pharmaceutical product, medicines. We know how important the prescription medicines are and improving health in this country, and the need to make sure that those drugs are safe and affordable. Prescription drugs have brought great advances in health outcomes. Just look at how much longer people are living. Over the past century, life expectancy increased from 49 years to 77 years, and that's since the past century. Great improvements made. We know that beneficial drugs need to be more affordable, more readily available, but allowing drugs to enter into the United States from other countries is not the answer. The Department of Health and Human Services found that importing prescription drugs might save 1 to 2% on their prescription drugs, and I'm not describing that as insignificant, but these are modest servings compared to what the outcome might be. Importing risky prescription drugs from other countries could cause more health problems, more suffering, and in the final analysis, more expensive treatments. Americans buy medicine to lower their cholesterol, fight cancer, prevent heart disease, and some of these have had remarkable effects. Heart disease is much less threatening, still a dangerous disease, but much less than it was some years ago. Imagine what would happen to a mother or a child if they were relying on imported drugs, only to find out that the drugs were unsafe. We need to be absolutely certain that we are not putting Americans' lives at risk. And that's why I'm opposing Amendment 2107, the McCain Amendment, which would allow potentially unsafe prescription drugs to be shipped across our border and directly into the medicine cabinets of homes throughout America. Instead of safeguarding American patients, this amendment could bring potentially dangerous and ineffective drugs from Canada. And I say that because though they may seem safe, Canadian drugs, but we already know that drugs that claim to be from Canada are not always reliable, that they're not worth a risk. An FDA investigation found that 85% of drugs imported from Canada, Canadian Internet pharmacies, were actually from 27 other countries, and many of these were pure counterfeit. The Senate already recognized the danger that imported drugs pose to Americans. On 5 previous occasions, this chamber has asked the Department of Health and Human Services to certify that importation will not put people at risk. And the Secretary still has not been able to confirm that imported drugs would be safe. So, Madam President, I want to make another observation. And I find it kind of amusing to watch Republican colleagues talk about how wonderful the Canadian health system is. Last I checked, Canadians' health care system is socialized medicine. And during the health care reform debate, these same colleagues were decrying the Canadian system as a horrible socialist experiment. And so my colleagues need to make up their minds. Do they prefer socialized medicine? If so, it comes with some risks, and I'm proud that many of our country's drugs originate in the state of New Jersey, commonly known as the medicine chest state. In fact, there are over 46,000 highly skilled people in my home state working to produce life-saving drugs. And it would be wrong to undercut the hard work of these trained New Jerseyans only to put Americans in danger. Right now, the drugs in our country are safe, effective, as we've seen by the results, And thanks to Senator Harkin and Senator Enzi, this bill will even make our drugs more safe. Americans deserve real peace of mind. When they open the pill bottle, swallow their medicine, they have to know that the product is safe and effective. And I urge my colleagues to support keeping medicine in our country safe and affordable. And I urge the drug companies, the medicine companies, to do whatever they can to make drugs, medicines more available at cheaper prices. And I urge my colleagues to vote against Amendment 2107. With that, I yield the floor.
Madam President, I would yield 6 minutes to the senator from West Virginia, again off of the opposition to the McCain Amendment time.
Without objection. Senator from West Virginia is recognized.
Madam President, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate so much your hard work on this bill, a very important piece of legislation. Before I speak to the bill, I want to commemorate the life of a dear friend and a true West Virginia, Coach Bill Stewart. Bill was taken from us 2 days ago at the age of 59, but he left behind a lifetime of memories and love for the state of West Virginia. Bill Stewart was a proud West Virginian in every sense of the word, and he was the best cheerleader this state ever had. Whether it was playing ball at Fairmont State, where I first met him, or coaching West Virginia University to a Fiesta Bowl win, where he took an underdog team to a thrilling victory. You never had to worry about Bill's enthusiasm. He had enough for all of us. In fact, you were either a friend of Bill Stewart's or he hadn't met you yet, because when he did, you were his friend for life. Bill was raised in New Martinsville, West Virginia, and was a West Virginian through and through. Countless young men thrived under his coaching, but he was also a truly dedicated family man. To his wife, Karen, and his son, Blaine, I hope Karen and Blaine, both of them, know just how much Bill meant to all of the people of our state, how much we loved him, and how much we're all going to miss him. My wife, Gail, and I will keep Bill's entire family in our thoughts and prayers. Thank you, Madam President. And now, I would like to turn to another issue, one that touches all of us, Democrats and Republicans, rich and poor, young and old, West Virginians and New Yorkers alike. Madam President, as you know, the prescription drug epidemic is destroying communities across this nation. It's wreaking havoc on our educational system, it's devastating our workforce and our economy, and tearing our families apart. Prescription drug abuse is the fastest growing drug problem in the United States, and it is claiming the lives of thousands of Americans every year. According to a report issued by the Center of Disease Control in November, the death toll from overdoses of prescription painkillers has more than tripled in the past decade. More than 40 people die every day, every single day, from overdoses involving narcotic pain relievers. These prescription painkillers kill more Americans than heroin and cocaine combined. It's especially tough in my home state of West Virginia, which has the highest rate of drug overdose deaths in the country. Nearly 90% of those deaths are linked to prescription drugs abuse. For months now, I've been going out and listening to the stories of so many people in my state, law enforcement, business owners, school teachers, pastors, and especially the children who ask for help to get their parents off this stuff. So I worked with all of them to offer an amendment to this bill that would make it harder for anyone to abuse prescription drugs. That bipartisan amendment was submitted on behalf of the countless West Virginians and Americans whose lives have been cut short by drug abuse, and the families who are picking up the pieces. And it is on their behalf that I thank my colleagues in the Senate for passing it last night unanimously. Madam President, I was so moved and encouraged to see the members of the U.S. Senate come together across party lines and unanimously approve this measure to take a serious step to fight this prescription drug epidemic. I strongly urge our friends in the House to do the same, and the President to sign this important bill. This measure is not the work of just one person. However, I'd like to thank the co-sponsors of this bill who all believe so strongly in it. Senator Mark Kirk, my dear friend from Illinois, Senator Kristen Gillibrand of New York, and Senator Chuck Schumer of New York, and of course, my senior senator from West Virginia, Senator Jay Rockefeller. I also want to thank Governor Earl Ray Tomblin and Congressman Nick Rahal for their tireless work on this issue, along with Congressman Vern Buchanan of Florida, who is doing excellent work to end the pill mills. As we all know, last night's vote gives this amendment a solid step forward. But there is much work remaining to give our communities the right tools to fight this epidemic. That's because all too often we all hear stories like this one, which the Ohio County Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition in my state shared with me. A young boy was injured and was prescribed prescription painkillers containing hydrocodone. After the injury, he began using the opiates with the other teens in his school. They began by taking pills and eventually, by graduation, snorting the pills on a daily basis. One day, he was convinced by a friend to try IV use. He was married. He was able to hold down a job until he began using it through IV. His wife was addicted to painkillers, and their child was born addicted to drugs. He wanted more than anything to be a hard-working father and husband. He wanted to live to amend his past behaviors. He completed treatment, but eventually began using painkillers again. This man, in his mid-20s, overdosed and died. Think about it. This young man was snorting pills by high school graduation and dead in his mid-20s. Unfortunately, that story is more common than we would all like to believe. A 2012 study by the National Institute on Drug Abuse found that 8% of high school seniors had admitted to abusing Vicodin in the past year. The Centers for Disease Control has found that about 12 million Americans have reported non-medical use of prescription painkillers in the past year. Unlike many illegal drugs, prescription drugs aren't produced in basement labs or smuggled across the border. They are found in our own medicine cabinets and are often prescribed for medically necessary reasons. And that makes it much easier for people to become addicted or abuse these medications. In 2010 alone, pharmacies dispensed the equivalent of 42 tons of pure hydrocodone. That is enough to give every man, woman, and child in America 24 Vicodin pills. The fact is, the number is just too high. People are getting these pills because it's just too easy. That is why this amendment would make it harder to get addictive prescription drugs by moving them to a more restrictive category in our official drug classification system. Practicality, this means that patients would need an original prescription for refills and pills and would have to be stored more securely. Madam President, let me close by sharing a few more personal stories.
Senator, the time says it has expired.
Okay. I just want to say this to the chairman, to both of our chairmen on both sides of the aisle. Thank you so much for a piece of legislation that's much needed. Thank you for an amendment that is agreed upon, voted upon unanimously and accepted last night. It's going to go a long way to fight the drug abuse in America and save countless children's lives. Thank you. Thank you so much. I yield the floor.
Senator from Iowa.
Madam President, I yield myself. How much more time is left on the McCain opposition?
3 minutes.
Well, I yield myself that time and a couple of minutes off of the bill. Madam President, again, for senators to note that we're going to start voting here in about 9 or 10 minutes. And these will be 10-minute votes. The first vote will be on the amendment offered by the senator from Kentucky, Senator Paul. And then the next amendment would be the Senator McCain's amendment, and then Senator Sanders' amendment, Senator Durbin's amendment, and then final passage. And by consent earlier, all of those votes will be 10-minute votes. So I just wanted to make sure that people knew just what the lay of the land was here. And Madam President, I might just say that we're rapidly approaching the final passage of this bill. We've had great cooperation from all senators on both sides in moving this legislation forward here on the floor. We've had good debates. They haven't been drawn out endlessly, but we've had good debates and I think a good airing of the amendments and the bill. And so I want to thank all senators for that. Hopefully that we can move rapidly to wrap up this bill and move it on. This bill, as I've said many times, is the product of about 18 months of very hard work by Senator Enzi and all of the senators on our committee on both sides of the aisle. It is a true compromise bill, a bipartisan bill. It has, as I mentioned earlier, the support of a broad spectrum of stakeholders, from the pharmaceutical companies to pharmacists to consumer organizations across a broad spectrum. Supports this bill, and it's necessary that we get it done, and that's why we have urged everyone to expeditiously get this done before the break period coming up for Memorial Day, because we have to get this done so that the Food and Drug Administration won't have to start sending pink slips out to people this summer, that there won't be any disruptions, and that they can get on with the business of making sure that we get drugs and devices to patients expeditiously but safely, making sure that our drugs and our devices are safe. So it's a good bill, and it's the result of a lot of hard work by a lot of people. And so I hope that we can move these amendments rapidly and move to final passage this afternoon.
Madam President,
Senator from Wyoming.
I just ask unanimous consent that when we begin the next vote, Senator Paul has 7 minutes left on his time, that he be given 2 minutes as the explanation for his bill in exchange for those 7 minutes.
Is there objection? Objection.
Madam President.
Senator from Iowa.
Madam President, again, I yield myself as time as I may consume off of the bill.
Without objection.
And Madam President, we're rapidly approaching a vote on the Paul amendment. I know the senator wants to have a couple of minutes to speak on that. So I rise in opposition to the Paul amendment. I oppose it for several reasons. Perhaps the most important reason is that this is a drug bill. This bill deals with drugs and devices. It does not deal with food. We dealt with dietary supplements and vitamins and things like that in the food safety bill that we passed here 2 years ago. And that bill, again, was a consensus bill. It was been through the committee structure, and we brought it on the floor, had a lot of debate on it. We made modifications at that time to the whole area of supplements, vitamins, minerals, and supplements. And that's the proper place to address it, not on a bill like this. This bill is a bill on drugs and not on supplements and food. So that's the most important reason. I'll make that same argument on the Durbin Amendment, that it shouldn't be here because this is a drug bill. On substance, I would say this bill really turns kind of food law on its head. It would allow supplements to be sold with claims to cure any disease, such as AIDS or cancer, without any kind of FDA review whatsoever. Now, I take a backseat to no one in terms of my support for the vitamin, mineral, and supplement industry or their products. So Senator Hatch and I were the two people that put through the DeShay bill, the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, in 1994. And we have sort of been protectors of it, if I might say that, and working to make sure that it's implemented correctly since that time. But the Paul Amendment would just go way too far, way too far. It's not consensus policy. In fact, it's strongly opposed by even the dietary supplement industry. I would note that the Natural Products Association, the United Natural Products Association, the Council on Responsible Nutrition, all three big umbrella groups are all opposed to the Paul Amendment. So, again, this would just open up this industry to just snake oil salesmen again. And those of us who want to make sure that people have access, unfettered access to safe products and to good, nutritious vitamins, minerals, and supplements, the last thing we want to see is now people in their garages mixing things up and selling them as snake oil. You know, this is not good for America. It's not good for people who want to take vitamins and supplements and minerals for their own health. It would just throw this thing open and turn the clock back 50 years or more to where anybody can make any claim they want, and then and the FDA would have no way of reviewing it whatsoever. So I will move to table the amendment at the appropriate time, but I urge all senators to oppose the Paul Amendment.
Madam President, I yield the floor.
Who yields time? Who yields time?
Madam President, I yield the senator from Kentucky the time that he's already entitled to.
Okay.
And
Madam President?
Needs it.
Senator from Kentucky is recognized for 2 minutes under the previous order.
My amendment is to rein in the FDA. I believe they've gotten overzealous in their duties. They do have important duties, but I think they've gotten overblown. My amendment has 3 parts. First, it attempts to stop the FDA's overzealous regulation of vitamins, foods, and supplements by codifying the First Amendment prohibition on prior restraint. What this means is the First Amendment says that you can't restrain speech before it happens. This amendment also helps to make explicit that commercial speech is speech and should be protected. Under current rules, the FDA prevents even the manufacturer of prune juice from saying that prune juice relieves constipation. I think that's an FDA that's gotten a little bit out of hand, and I think vitamin supplement manufacturers and distributors should be allowed to give you information, and that the buyer should be allowed to review that information in making decisions about the product, and that this speech should not be restricted. Second, my amendment says the FDA doesn't need to be carrying weapons. I don't need to see bureaucrats carrying automatic weapons. I would rather, if there are police officers necessary in the operation of their duties, that they have the FBI. The FDA does not need to be sending armed agents to the Amish farms to arrest a farmer for selling milk from the cow. Third, my amendment fixes what needs to be fixed in a lot of regulatory crimes. We need to add in the component of mens rea. Mens rea means that when you commit a crime and they threaten to put you in jail, they have to have proof that you intended, that your mind, you had a guilty mind, and that you had intent to commit a crime. So we add 2 words, that if they're going to accuse you of a crime, it has to be knowing and willful. These are very simple words, but changes the burden of government. If the government's going to accuse you of the crime, they need to know this. If Congress is going to criminalize conduct at a federal level as it does in the FDA Act, then the least we can do is add in
Senator's
the
time has
mens rea
expired.
requirement. Thank you, and I urge support for my amendment.